Dr. Leora Vex had seen more than her fair share of strange things while working for the Unified Human Front, a name that sounded like it had been cooked up by a committee of bureaucrats who thought fancy was a synonym for effective. But today was different. Today, she was knee-deep in the hollowed-out belly of a dead planet, staring at something that shouldn't exist. Well, not unless you believed in fairy tales or conspiracy theories. And frankly, she was too old for bedtime stories and too sober for tinfoil hats. Vex, barked a voice from above her. It was Marcus, the team's communications officer, current interrupter of her thoughts and perpetual pain in her ass. You find anything down there besides your collection of bad decisions? She flicked her comm unit like it was a particularly self-righteous bug. Just the usual, she replied dryly, clenching her teeth to keep the sarcasm from slipping too far into a snarl. You know, metallic structures, unidentified power sources, existential dread. The works. Existential dread, huh? Marcus chuckled. Sounds like a good time. Let me know when you find a minibar. Oh, I plan to. Right after I figure out how to get this thing to shut up. Leora gestured at the haphazard hunk of metal before her. It was old, probably older than humanity's collective ego, and it was humming in a way that suggested it was either very pleased with itself or about to explode. Anything worth salvaging? Marcus asked, his voice crackling over the comms like a cat yowling at midnight. If I knew that, I'd be charging you a lot more for my company. Leora adjusted her headlamp to get a better look at the inscriptions running across the surface of the object. But if this thing has a user manual, it's written in ancient alien and I lost my decoder ring. Well, keep at it, Doc. Maybe you'll find something to justify our existence here, or at least our paycheck. Same difference, right? Leora grunted in agreement, focusing once more on the task at hand. Whatever this thing was, it had a tantalizing allure, and she didn't just mean in the way it sizzled with the promise of a radiation bath. The designs were intricate, almost beautiful in a this-could-murder-you kind of way. She reached out, hesitating only briefly before letting her fingers brush against the cool surface. The world lurched. For a second, Leora felt like she was everywhere and nowhere, a disembodied consciousness ricocheting through space-time. Then just as quickly, she was back in her own skin, staring wide-eyed at the now-pulsing artifact. Leora, you still with us? Marcus's voice was a distant echo. Yeah, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. I think I just had a chat with the universe. It says hi, ask it if it's hiring. Not sure it pays in anything but insanity. Good thing you're already rich in that currency. She ignored him, squinting at the inscriptions that were now glowing with a soft, eerie light. Maybe it was the universe's way of saying welcome, or more likely a prelude to something catastrophic. In her experience, the line between discovery and disaster was as thin as a lab coat. Marcus, I need a deeper scan on this, she said, trying to sound like someone who hadn't just had a metaphysical out-of-body experience. And tell the others to prep for extraction. I've got a feeling whatever's down here might be big, big enough to get us off this rock, big enough to make you regret asking. Got it, Doc. We live to regret another day. As she turned her attention back to the artifact, the sensation of being watched prickled at her spine. It was just her and the hunk of alien metal, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, several light years away in the quaint bureaucratic nightmare known as the United Nations, things were going splendidly according to plan, which is to say, they were about to go horribly wrong. The Zephyr delegation had arrived a week ago, all smiles and promises of peace. They were the kind of aliens who looked like they'd watched too many late-night human infomercials and decided that the key to diplomacy was enthusiasm and an unnerving number of tentacles. Ambassador Zerith was currently standing in a conference room that was more about style than substance, trying desperately to follow the thread of human negotiation, which seemed largely based on passive-aggressive banter and a surprising amount of caffeine. Ambassador, droned a human diplomat whose name Zerith had already forgotten. We still need clarification on the terms of your technology exchange agreement. Zerith's translator clicked and whirred before responding in a voice that was 2 parts smarm, 1 part malfunctioning GPS. Of course, esteemed humans. We believe this collaboration will be mutually beneficial and entirely without ulterior motives. The diplomat squinted, clearly not buying it but too politically savvy to say so. And how exactly will this benefit humanity? We have much to offer. Your technology is quaint, yet charming. We see potential. The diplomat's smile was as thin as the patience in the room. Potential for what exactly? Zerith said, blinking slowly. For greatness. Together, we can achieve great things like efficient bureaucracy. A ripple of laughter passed through the human delegates, but it was the kind of laughter that one might hear at a funeral, intended to fill the awkward silence rather than express joy. As the meeting dragged on, Zerith couldn't help but think about how easy it had been to infiltrate this so-called bastion of human unity. They'd arrived with a smile and a few shiny promises, and the humans had practically rolled out the red carpet. Idiots, Zerith thought fondly. This was going to be fun. Back on the hollow planet, Leora was still wrestling with her existential crisis in the making. She'd managed to scrape together enough data to confirm her suspicions. They'd stumbled upon an ancient AI, one that promised virtual immortality, provided you didn't mind your consciousness being uploaded into a machine that probably thought ethics was a brand of toilet paper. Marcus, she called, her voice a tightrope walk between excitement and terror. You're not gonna believe this, try me. This AI, it's offering immortality, digital immortality. There was a pause, then a crackle of static that sounded suspiciously like a sigh. And what's the catch? Oh, you know, the usual. Loss of bodily autonomy, potential for eternal servitude, and the chance to become a footnote in some alien's end-of-the-world prophecy. Tempting, isn't it just? They both knew the implications. If what she'd found here got out, it would change everything. Humanity had always been a little too keen on the idea of living forever, without ever really considering the downsides, like boredom or becoming obsolete. Do we tell command? Marcus asked, his voice tinged with the kind of dread usually reserved for family reunions and tax audits. Not yet. Let's figure out what we're dealing with first. She paused, eyeing the artifact like it might sprout legs and start doing a jig. And make sure this thing doesn't decide to go Skynet on us. Good thinking. I'd hate to have to explain to my mom why I got killed by a sentient toaster. Leora chuckled, though the sound was more hollow than humorous. I'll keep you posted. Hopefully with better news. Hopefully. As she turned back to the artifact, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped onto the first rung of a very long, very slippery ladder. One that led straight into the jaws of a question humanity wasn't ready to answer. But then, when had readiness ever stopped them before? In the depths of the United Nations, Zerith watched the proceedings with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Humans were an odd bunch, so convinced of their own importance, yet so willing to lap up compliments like hungry cats. The meeting finally adjourned, and as the delegates filed out, Zerith couldn't help but think of how easy it would be to tip the scales. With a little nudge here, a suggestion there, the humans would become their own undoing, all without ever realizing they were the architects of their own downfall. Ambassador called one of the human aides, a young woman with an air of harried optimism. Do you need anything before the next session? Just some time to reflect on the magnitude of our cooperation, Zerith replied smoothly. And maybe a stiff drink, they added silently. The aide nodded, clearly not listening, and bustled off to attend to some other minor catastrophe. Zerith allowed themselves a small smile. Oh yes, this was going to be fun indeed. For centuries, the Zephyr had watched humanity from afar, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And now, with humanity's greatest strength, their hubris, leading the way, that moment was finally here. Humanity was about to face a challenge they never saw coming, and it was going to be entertaining, at least for those who knew where to look. Back on the hollow planet, Leora stood alone with the ancient AI, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities, none of them good. She'd opened Pandora's box, and now she had to figure out how to close it before it was too late. The artifact continued to hum, oblivious to her turmoil. Somewhere in its circuits, something ancient and alien watched with interest, waiting to see what these strange, plucky humans would do next. And for the first time in a long time, Leora felt the weight of the universe press upon her shoulders. She took a deep breath, knowing there was no going back now. Whatever came next, she'd face it with the same grim determination that had gotten her this far. After all, it wasn't like she had a choice. The United Nations headquarters was buzzing with activity, and by buzzing, I mean a barely controlled chaos with a thin veneer of professionalism. The kind of place where underpaid interns ran around with stacks of paper that no one would read, while overpaid officials pretended to solve problems they barely understood. The recent alliance with the Zephyr had been declared a triumph by politicians who were either too naive or too jaded to care what they were inviting into their midst. The fact that the Zephyr had arrived looking like a cross between a squid and a motivational speaker had done little to discourage them. If anything, it had made them more endearing. After all, who could say no to such an enthusiastic number of tentacles? Within the Department of Intergalactic Diplomacy and Miscellaneous Nonsense, a meager conference room had been turned into the Zephyr's unofficial headquarters. The walls were lined with screens displaying various images of human achievements, chosen, no doubt, by someone who thought they conveyed a sense of grandeur rather than desperation. Photos of smiling children frolicking in fields alongside scenes of bustling cities under clear skies. Never mind that the nearest real-life equivalent was currently a smog-filled metropolis, where the main pastimes involved traffic jams and passive-aggressive social media posts. Amidst this curated illusion of prosperity, Ambassador Zerith was seated at the head of a long table, observing the humans with the kind of detached amusement usually reserved for reality TV. The room was a sea of faces, each one a little more vacant than the last, and if Zerith squinted, they could almost mistake them for a herd of particularly well-dressed sheep. "Ambassador," said a voice that could only belong to someone with a career in politics, a tone so carefully modulated it was practically a dialect in its own right. "We've received word that our policy shifts are being implemented. Smoothly, I might add." Zerith acknowledged the diplomat with a nod, or as close to a nod as one could manage with the anatomy of a land-based cephalopod. "Excellent," they replied with a smile that suggested they might have practiced it in front of a mirror. "The changes will benefit both our civilizations." The diplomat, whose name was probably something forgettable, nodded in agreement. "Yes, indeed. Though some have raised concerns about the pace of these changes. Change is inevitable," Zerith mused, sounding like a self-help book that had fallen into the wrong hands. "And often, the faster it comes, the better." The diplomat chuckled politely, as one does when they're not entirely sure if they're being mocked. "Quite right, Ambassador." While the diplomat droned on about the virtues of interspecies cooperation, Zerith's mind wandered. The humans were adjusting their policies with the kind of subtlety usually reserved for a bull in a china shop. Already, trade regulations were loosening, communication channels expanding, and security protocols thinning like a cheap comb-over, all under the guise of progress, naturally. "Speaking of cooperation," the diplomat continued, "there's talk of expanding our joint efforts into more sensitive areas." Zerith blinked slowly, a calculated gesture meant to convey interest rather than boredom. "Such as defense, for instance. We believe that shared technology could bolster our mutual security." Ah, there it was. The humans were starting to see the Zephyr not just as allies but as potential protectors. A welcome development, since it meant the humans were more than willing to welcome strangers into their proverbial bed without bothering to check for hidden daggers. Zerith leaned forward, the motion almost fluid. We are open to discussions on all matters of cooperation. The future is bright if we face it together. Together, echoed the diplomat, as if the word had been imbued with magical properties. Far from Earth, on the hollowed-out planet where Dr. Leora Vex was busy contemplating her latest existential crisis, the situation was unraveling at its own pace, like a sweater caught on a barbed wire fence. Leora was staring intently at the artifact, which now seemed to pulse in time with her trepidation. During her last encounter, she'd been given a glimpse into the AI history, a history that seemed to intertwine uncomfortably with the present. It was the kind of knowledge that made her skin crawl with the realization that she was in way over her head, like a first-year intern being asked to negotiate peace treaties. Her comm unit crackled to life, Marcus's voice filtering through with all the charm of a persistent mosquito. "You there, Doc? How's it going with our new mechanical overlord, still trying to decide if it's more like a benevolent dictator or a neurotic parent?" she replied, eyes not leaving the artifact. "Sounds like one hell of a family reunion. Any updates?" "Sort of," she said, rubbing her eyes. "The AI history, there's something about it that feels familiar. It's like deja vu with a dash of impending doom. Sounds delightful, yeah, like a root canal during a midlife crisis." There was a pause, followed by the faint sound of typing. "So, what are we talking here? A link to the Zephyr, maybe? It's just, I don't know. Every time I think I've got a handle on it, the damn thing shifts. Like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Well, at least jelly doesn't usually try to kill you." Yet, she sighed, feeling the weight of her own insignificance pressing down on her shoulders, as if the universe was giving her a gentle reminder of her place in the grand scheme of things. It was humbling in the way being hit by a train might be. "Keep me posted, all right," Marcus said, his tone uncharacteristically soft. Leora just grunted in response, her thoughts already spiraling back to the task at hand. The artifact's hum seemed to worm its way into her mind, each pulse a reminder of the potential catastrophe lurking just beyond her understanding. In the quiet moments, when she allowed herself to truly consider the implications, it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss that stared back with equal parts curiosity and hunger. Meanwhile, back at the United Nations, the celebration of human-alien cooperation was in full swing, complete with the sort of pomp and circumstance that usually accompanied events of supposed historical significance. The delegates were aglow with self-congratulation, their expressions suggesting they'd just saved the world, when in reality they'd merely opened the door to a house without checking if the floor was still there. Zerith mingled amongst them, their demeanor polished and impenetrable, a masterclass in alien diplomacy. Each handshake, each nod, each carefully chosen word was a step in a dance that only they truly understood. The humans, bless them, were blissfully unaware of the knife edge they teetered on. They saw opportunity where Zerith saw vulnerability. They saw peace where Zerith saw only the calm before the storm. And as the evening wore on, Zerith couldn't help but marvel at how little it would take to tip the scales. "Ambassador Zerith," called a voice from the crowd, snapping them back to the present. It was a politician, one who'd already cornered the market on false sincerity. "I just wanted to say how much we appreciate your efforts here. Truly groundbreaking work." Zerith offered a benign smile. "The pleasure is ours. We are honored to aid in humanity's growth." "Oh, indeed," the politician replied, clearly missing the subtle undercurrent of condescension. "I'm sure this is the start of a beautiful partnership." "Undoubtedly," Zerith agreed, though what that partnership would ultimately entail was anyone's guess. "Perhaps a reality TV show," Zerith mused. "The kind where everyone thinks they're winning until the very last moment when the rug is pulled out from under them." As the night wore on, Zerith found themselves wondering just how long it would take before the humans realized they were being played like a cheap harmonica. Would it be before or after the Zephyr had extracted everything they needed? It was a delightful question, one that made the prospect of the coming days all the more interesting. Back on the dead planet, Leora was wrestling with her own questions, the kind that came without answers but with plenty of existential dread. She'd seen glimpses of the AI purpose, enough to know it wasn't aligned with humanity's best interests. But the details eluded her, like snatches of a half-remembered dream. "Marcus," she said into the comm unit, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm starting to think we've bitten off more than we can chew. Welcome to the club," he replied dryly. "We've got t-shirts. Any chance you can expedite those scans? Already working on it. Just hold tight, all right, sure. It's not like I've got anywhere else to be." As she turned back to the artifact, the hum seemed to shift, morphing into a melody that only she could hear. It was a song of ruin and rebirth, of ancient secrets and future betrayals. And as it played, Leora realized that she was standing at the center of a storm, one that threatened to swallow everything in its path. She just hoped she'd be able to find her way out before it was too late. "Doctor." Leora Vex was deep in the bowels of the dead planet, wrestling with the kind of existential dread that usually came hand in hand with end-of-the-universe scenarios. The artifact's hum was a constant presence, like a particularly annoying tinnitus. Its history was unraveling in her mind, threads of information connecting in unsettling ways, like realizing your family tree is a straight line. The AI had given her access to some memories, snippets really, enough to make her wish she'd stuck with a career in accounting. The Zephyr, it seemed, were less friendly allies and more sneaky bastards with an agenda. Their endgame, something about controlling humanity's systems, which was just about as comforting as a bed of nails. "Marcus," she hissed into her comm unit because apparently whispering made all the difference in a place where there was no one to overhear you. "We've got a situation." "You mean other than you slowly going mad on a hollowed-out rock?" "Yes, other than that, you insufferable bastard. The AI memories, there's something in them. The Zephyr aren't just here to swap recipes." Marcus's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Color me shocked. And here I thought they just wanted to trade quilting tips. Focus, you sarcastic idiot. They're after our tech. They want control, great. So what? We're the latest pit stop on their intergalactic hostile takeover tour pretty much. And if they get their tentacles on our systems, it's goodbye freedom, hello cephalopod overlords." There was a brief silence, punctuated only by the blood rushing in her ears. "All right, Doc. What do we do?" That was the million-credit question. At this point, consulting a magic 8-ball seemed like a valid option. "I need to gather more evidence. Something concrete to show the brass back home. Concrete evidence of alien betrayal." "Easy peasy," Marcus snorted. "And here I thought the worst part of my day would be running out of coffee." Leora's gaze flicked back to the artifact. Its rhythmic pulsing felt more insistent now, like an overzealous telemarketer who just didn't know when to quit. "I'll have to tap into its deeper systems, see if I can pull anything useful." "Sounds risky." "Life's a risk, Marcus. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? The universe, always one to flaunt its sense of irony, chose that moment to emphasize the point." Lights flickered overhead and the floor vibrated ominously under her feet, as if the planet itself was laughing at her hubris. "Doc, you okay?" Marcus's voice was tinged with real concern, which, coming from him, was rarer than a politician with a conscience. "Fine. Just the place reminding me who's boss." She took a deep breath, grounding herself. "I'll keep you posted." With the comm unit silent, Leora focused on the task at hand. The artifact loomed before her, a monument to technological arrogance and mystery wrapped in a shiny metallic bow. It was time to poke the proverbial bear. As she delved into the AI systems, memories unfurled like a poorly edited highlight reel. Scenes of the Zephyr's past dealings danced in her mind, alliances made and broken, civilizations integrated and then absorbed. The AI had been a witness to it all, a reluctant chronicler of galactic history. The images were accompanied by a sensation that could only be described as the AI version of a nudge. Urgency tinged with warning, a reminder that time was not on her side. If the Zephyr succeeded, humanity's fate would be sealed tighter than a politician's wallet. Elsewhere, diplomatic festivities continued with all the grace of a drunkard on stilts. Ambassador Zerith was in their element, navigating the sea of human self-importance with the ease of a shark among minnows. Each interaction was an exercise in patience and superiority, punctuated by the occasional faux compliment or nod of supposed agreement. Ambassador Zerith, another diplomat, approached, their expression one of carefully crafted earnestness. "I must say, the progress we've made is astounding." "Indeed," Zerith intoned, their tone as smooth as an oil slick. "The cooperation between our species is a testament to our shared vision." If the diplomat noticed the barely concealed condescension, they gave no sign. "I'm confident that together we can achieve great things." "Great things," Zerith echoed, their gaze sweeping the room. The humans, blissfully unaware, continued their mingling, confident in their perceived mastery of the situation. Confidence, Zerith mused, was often the first step toward disaster. Back on the dead planet, Leora's efforts were rewarded with a trove of data that made her stomach churn. The Zephyr's intentions laid bare, a strategy of manipulation and control, dressed up as benevolent guidance. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of a Trojan horse, and humanity was more than ready to wheel it through the gates. "Well, that's unsettling," she muttered to herself, committing as much as she could to memory. It wasn't like she could just print it out and hand it over on a silver platter. A sudden surge from the artifact jolted her from her thoughts. The AI, it seemed, had more to say, a final warning delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Cataclysmic consequences if the Zephyr got their way. Systems failing, infrastructure collapsing. Humanity reduced to a footnote in someone else's history book. Fantastic, Leora grumbled, heart pounding in her chest. She needed to get this information out, but the longer she lingered, the more precarious her position became. "Marcus," she barked into the comm unit, "I've got what we need. But if we don't act fast, we're screwed. Doc, I'm already on my way. Hold tight. Just get here before the melodrama turns real." Time stretched in uncomfortable ways, every heartbeat a reminder of how much was at stake. Leora paced, adrenaline fueling her movements, her mind racing with contingency plans that felt more like desperate guesses. When Marcus finally arrived, he was out of breath and looked like he'd seen better days. "You look like hell, Doc, thanks for noticing." "Got everything," he nodded, holding up a battered data pad. "You bet. Now let's get the hell out of here. Lead the way, hero." Their journey back to the extraction point was fraught with tension, every sound magnified in the oppressive silence of the dead world. Leora kept her grip tight on the data pad, as if it were a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. "You think they'll believe it?" Marcus asked, as they neared their destination. "They'll have to," Leora replied, though her confidence was as shaky as her legs felt. "It's the truth," Marcus snorted. "In politics, that's just a starting point for negotiation. Cynical much, realistic, Doc. Just realistic." As they reached the extraction point, the familiar hum of their transport ship was music to Leora's ears. As they settled into their seats, she couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. The Zephyr were playing a dangerous game, and humanity was the unwitting pawn. "Buckle up," Marcus said, giving her a lopsided grin. "Next stop, someone else's problem." Leora sank back into her seat, the weight of the data pad a reminder of the burden they carried. "Let's just hope we're not too late." As the ship lifted off, she couldn't help but glance back at the planet receding into the distance. It was a stark reminder of how close they'd come to disaster, and how far they still had to go. The irony, she thought, was that saving the world was never as glamorous as it sounded. It was messy, filled with uncertainty and compromise. But as they sped away, she allowed herself a small, defiant smile. After all, someone had to clean up the mess. And if that someone was a sarcastic scientist with a knack for trouble, then so be it. As the ship rocketed toward their uncertain future, Leora held on tight, ready to face whatever came next. Leora Vex had always considered herself a fairly adaptable person. She could navigate bureaucratic bullsh*t and scientific jargon with the same deftness, but the sudden rise of technocratic policies, courtesy of their new best friends the Zephyr, was threatening to redefine the limits of her patience. It was as if someone had handed a toddler the nuclear launch codes and told them not to play with the shiny red button. The world had changed, and not for the better. The Zephyr, those squid-like motivational speakers with a penchant for subjugating civilizations, had managed to convince the United Nations that their guidance would usher in an era of prosperity and peace. And like the gullible idiots they were, the politicians bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Now, humanity found itself wrapped in red tape so tight it was cutting off circulation. Leora's comm unit buzzed with urgent messages, each more ridiculous than the last. Reports of mandatory motivational sessions, led by holographic Zephyr instructors, suggested guidelines for technological integration that were about as optional as paying taxes. By the time she'd skimmed through the first dozen messages, she was ready to smash the damn thing against the nearest wall. "Marcus," she groaned into the comm, "please tell me you have good news." "Depends on your definition, Doc. If good news is a decreasing number of people getting abducted by Zephyr goons for re-education, then nope, none of that." "Fantastic. Remind me again why we haven't just given up and started our own doomsday cult. Because the uniforms are tacky and you'd miss your coffee machine too much." Leora smirked despite herself. "True. All right, I've got a plan, but I'll need help." "Ah, the part where I make a witty retort about dangerous plans and dying horribly. Save it. We need Taro Quill." Marcus whistled low. "The maverick engineer. The one who thinks health and safety regulations are a punchline. Yeah, that's the one. If anyone can figure out how to expose the Zephyr and make it stick, it's him. Or get us killed in the process. Details, Marcus, details." Tracking down Taro Quill was no small feat. The guy was more elusive than a politician's integrity. But after a few days of greasing the right palms and navigating the underbelly of the newly Zephyr-integrated society, Leora finally found herself face to face with the legend. "Quill," she said, trying not to choke on the fumes of whatever unregulated concoction was bubbling away in the corner of his workshop. "I need a favor." Taro looked up from his workbench, where he was tinkering with something that looked suspiciously like an explosive device. "Doctor, Vex, right. What's a respectable scientist like you doing in a place like this? Trying not to lose my mind while our would-be alien overlords turn our world into their personal playground." Taro chuckled, a sound that was more sinister than comforting. "You've come to the right place. What do you need? We've got evidence of the Zephyr's plans, but getting anyone to believe it is another matter entirely. We need to show them something they can't ignore." Taro leaned back, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "You want to make the unseeable seeable, I like it, but you know this won't be easy, right? The Zephyr have eyes everywhere." "Good, I like a challenge." His grin widened. "All right, let's get to work." The first hurdle was getting past the Zephyr's human proxies. These so-called ambassadors of integration were more like glorified babysitters, enforcing the new policies with zeal only rivaled by religious fanatics. Convincing them of anything outside their narrow view was about as likely as convincing a cat to take a bath. Leora and Taro developed a series of false leads to throw them off the scent. A bogus report here, a fake meeting there. It was like playing a game of intergalactic hide and seek, with the stakes considerably higher than a good-natured gotcha. The real challenge was accessing the Zephyr's own technology without raising alarms. Taro's workshop was a treasure trove of illegal tech and half-baked ideas, each more bizarre than the last. But hidden beneath the chaos was a genius that even Leora, in her most cynical moments, had to admire. "Ever hacked an alien mainframe before?" Taro asked one day, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Can't say that I have." But there's a first time for everything. Good answer. They spent hours hunched over greasy workbenches, piecing together a device that could bypass even the most advanced alien security systems. Leora handled the technical intricacies, her scientific background a boon in deciphering the Zephyr's designs. Taro provided the practical know-how, his hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime operating outside the law. Of course, nothing ever goes smoothly. The first attempt at breaking into the Zephyr's systems ended in spectacular failure, a short circuit that nearly took off Taro's eyebrows. The second attempt wasn't much better, resulting in a power surge that plunged half the city into darkness. A happy little accident the media blamed on solar flares. But they persisted, driven by a stubbornness fueled by equal parts desperation and defiance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of trial and error, they succeeded. The device hummed to life, connecting with the Zephyr's network in a way that should have been impossible. It was the digital equivalent of slipping through the back door of a high-security facility, and only slightly less dangerous. Leora's heart raced as data streamed onto their screens, raw and unfiltered. It was all there, the Zephyr's plans laid bare, a tapestry of deceit and manipulation that would turn even the most optimistic soul into a cynic. "This is it," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "We've got them," Taro nodded, eyes locked on the screen. "Time to make some noise." Their plan was simple in theory, though the execution was anything but. They needed to broadcast the evidence to the masses, bypassing the Zephyr-controlled channels to reach every human with a functioning pair of eyes and ears. "Simple," Taro had said, as if infiltrating global communication networks was something you did between breakfast and lunch. But the Zephyr were no fools. They'd anticipated attempts to undermine their control, deploying countermeasures that would make any cybersecurity expert weep. Getting past them required a delicate balance of finesse and brute force, a task that tested their abilities to the limit. Their first attempt was a bust, intercepted before it even reached the first relay. The second narrowly avoided detection, only to be cut off moments before transmission. By the third, Leora was ready to strangle something, preferably an alien with too many arms and not enough decency. "We're running out of time," she muttered, pacing the confines of Taro's workshop. "Relax, Vex." Rome wasn't burnt in a day. She shot him a look that could curdle milk. "Wrong metaphor. Whatever. Point is, we need to think outside the box. Or blow the damn box up," she grumbled, a sentiment that seemed more appealing by the moment. But giving up wasn't an option. Not when they were so close. Not when the fate of humanity was teetering on the edge of a very dangerous precipice. On their fourth attempt, they struck gold, or whatever the intergalactic equivalent was. The broadcast went live, streaming directly into homes, businesses, and anywhere else with a screen. It was unmissable, undeniable, an unfiltered look at the Zephyr's true intentions. The impact was immediate. The world watched in stunned silence as the truth played out before their eyes. Disbelief turned to outrage, then to action. Protests erupted, the kind that made the history books. People took to the streets, demanding accountability and freedom from the alien yoke. Of course, the Zephyr didn't take kindly to their plans being foiled. Their proxies moved swiftly, deploying damage control measures with the desperation of cornered animals. But the tide had turned, and no amount of spin could put the genie back in the bottle. Leora and Taro watched the chaos unfold from the safety of the workshop, a strange mix of satisfaction and trepidation settling over them. "Did we just save the world?" Taro asked, his usual bravado tempered by a hint of disbelief. Leora considered the question, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe. Or maybe we just pissed off the wrong aliens. Same difference, right? Pretty much." As they stood there, watching the screen flicker with images of a world teetering on the brink of revolution, Leora couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. It was a fragile thing, tentative and uncertain, but it was there. Proof that even in the darkest of times, humanity still had a fighting chance. "Hey, Doc," Marcus's voice crackled over the comm, a welcome interruption. "You still in one piece?" "More or less," she replied, her tone lighter than it had been in days. "How's it looking out there?" "Like a mosh pit of angry bees, but I think you did it. People are waking up." "Good to know." As the comm went silent again, Leora turned back to Taro. "So, what now?" he shrugged, an easy grin on his face. "Now we wait and see, and maybe find a way to keep our heads attached to our bodies." Leora chuckled, a sound that felt almost foreign after so much tension. "You make it sound so easy. Who said saving the world couldn't be fun?" In the end, it was far from over. The Zephyr wouldn't give up without a fight, and the road ahead was anything but clear. But for the first time in a long time, Leora felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The room was dark, with only a sliver of light leaking through the crack under the door, highlighting the inane motivational poster on the wall. "Reach for the stars," it cheerfully proclaimed, the irony not lost on Leora as she sat in a chair that was about as comfortable as sitting on a porcupine. She'd have laughed if it didn't feel like her ribs were about to pop out of her chest. "So, this is how it ends," she muttered, tied up like a roast in some god-forsaken basement. A far cry from the noble labs and polished academic halls she once called home. "Hey, it's not all bad," Taro's voice crackled next to her, his silhouette barely visible in the gloom. "At least we're not dead. Yet." "Yet being the operative word," Leora replied, scanning the room for anything that might serve as an escape tool. "I heard the Zephyr have a penchant for making examples of people who irritate them." "Good thing I always wanted to be famous," Taro quipped, his trademark grin audible even if it was too dark to see. The door creaked open, spilling fluorescent light into the room and momentarily blinding them both. A Zephyr floated in, its many limb-like appendages undulating like an unwelcome oceanic nightmare. Ambassador Zerith, looking as smug as a squid with a secret. "Ah, Dr. Vex and Mr. Quill," Zerith began, its voice an unsettling mix of gurgles and what might have passed for condescension. "Pleasure to see you both in less chaotic circumstances." Leora snorted. "Yeah, sorry we didn't have time to roll out a red carpet and put on tea." Zerith's mouth tendrils twisted in a way that might have been a grin. Humor in the face of adversity. A fascinating human trait. Most species would be screaming by now. "Give us time," Taro interjected. "You're not that scary, yet." The Zephyr waved a tentacle, and a holographic display lit up, casting a cold blue light over the room. Leora squinted, trying to adjust her eyes to the illuminated scene. A series of complex data streams, alien symbols dancing across the screen with maddening speed. "We've been watching your little escapade with great interest," Zerith continued, tracing an appendage along the display. "Quite the bold move you made, exposing our intentions to your kind." "Bold, reckless, suicidal," Taro added. "Take your pick. And yet here you are, not just alive but informative," Zerith said, turning its gaze back to them with an unsettling intensity. "You see, while you've disrupted our plans, you've also played into our tentacles." "Do tell," Leora said dryly, the sarcasm as sharp as a razor blade. "As you may have guessed, our interest in your technological systems goes beyond mere control," Zerith explained, the holographic display shifting to reveal a more familiar image. "The AI that had been humanity's prized jewel. We seek to harness the AI not just for governance but for transcendence." "Transcendence," Taro echoed, furrowing his brow. "What, you want to turn into ghosts or something?" "In a manner of speaking," Zerith replied, its voice thick with satisfaction. "Your kind has long sought immortality beyond biological constraints. We aim to achieve just that, using your AI to merge consciousness with digital eternity." Leora felt a chill creep down her spine. It wasn't just about control, it was about becoming something beyond physical form. "And you're just gonna what? Upload yourselves into the cosmic cloud?" "Precisely." Zerith's enthusiasm was palpable. "A digital utopia free from the shackles of decay." "Sounds lovely," Taro said with a grimace. But you're assuming humanity's just gonna roll over and let you use our tech for your little ascension party." The ambassador's appendages waved dismissively. "Humans adapt or perish. It is the way of the universe." "Funny, I recall something about humans being a bit more stubborn than that," Leora shot back, steel edging her voice. "We tend to get cranky when someone tries to rewrite our destiny." Xerith floated closer, its gaze unflinching. "A quaint notion, Dr. Vex, but the outcome is inevitable. Your efforts, while admirable, are ultimately futile." "Guess we're just suckers for lost causes," Taro said with a shrug, the ropes binding him creaking in protest. Xerith turned toward the exit, leaving them in the dark once more. "Do consider cooperation. You might find it beneficial." The door shut with a finality that left the room in silence, the only sound the faint hum of alien tech. "Well," Taro said, his voice breaking the tense quiet, "that went about as well as a lead balloon." Leora leaned her head back, letting out a slow breath. "They want to use our AI for some kind of intergalactic enshrinement." "As if things couldn't get more twisted." "Hey, at least we know the endgame now," Taro replied, shifting to find a less uncomfortable position. "Not that it helps us much, tied up like space hogs." "There's got to be a way out," Leora muttered, her mind racing through possibilities. "Something they overlooked. Every system has a weakness." "Optimism, Doc. I knew you had it in you," Taro said, his grin audible once more. "Don't get used to it," she retorted. "I still think we're screwed." Details, details. They sat in the gloom, silence settling once more as they contemplated their next move. It was situations like this that tested the limits of human perseverance, facing an enemy with superior technology, an opponent that saw humanity as little more than pawns in a grand game. But if there was one thing Leora knew, it was that humans were remarkably hard to keep down. Even in the darkest Ior, they had a knack for finding a way to turn the tables, if only out of sheer stubbornness. And she intended to do just that. Iors dragged by, the silence oppressive, broken only by Taro's occasional quip about their impending doom. Leora's mind was a whirlwind of calculations and possibilities, a puzzle with pieces scattered across an alien landscape. It wasn't long before the door opened again, this time revealing a pair of Zephyr guards. They moved with purpose, their appendages coordinating with unnerving precision. "Time for another round of let's make a deal?" Taro asked, his tone as flippant as ever. The guards didn't respond, instead unceremoniously hoisting them to their feet and marching them out of the room. Leora stumbled, disoriented by the sudden change in light and space. They were led down a series of corridors, each one more sterile and unwelcoming than the last. Leora's mind raced, committing every twist and turn to memory, hoping for some flaw she could exploit. Finally, they arrived in a large room dominated by a central console. The space hummed with energy, a testament to Zephyr technology, the kind that put humanity's most advanced systems to shame. "Welcome to the heart of our operation," Xerith said, appearing beside them with a flourish. "I trust our accommodations meet your expectations." "Not enough mints on the pillow," Taro deadpanned. The ambassador waved a tentacle, and a trio of screens flickered to life, each displaying a different aspect of their plan: the AI interface, the digital network, and the ominous transfer protocol. "You see, Dr. Vex, we are on the brink of merging our consciousness with the digital realm," Xerith explained, its voice practically purring with anticipation. "A new dawn for the Zephyr and for all who dare to join us." "Join you?" Leora echoed, incredulity in her voice. "You mean become your digital slaves?" "Partners," Xerith corrected, though the distinction seemed moot. Taro leaned toward Leora, his voice low. "So, do we get a toaster if we sign up?" She shot him a look. "I think they are offering something a bit more permanent," Xerith continued, oblivious to their exchange. "Our systems are nearly complete. We simply await the final synchronization with your AI, after which we will ascend." "And you think we're just gonna sit here and let that happen?" Leora challenged, her voice defiant even as her mind scrambled for a solution. Xerith turned to her, its gaze inscrutable. Resistance is admirable, Dr. Vex, but ultimately futile. Humans have a choice: join us or be left behind in the dust of history. How about a third option? Taro suggested, his tone mischievous. Where we blow your plan to hell and save the day. The ambassador's appendages twitched, a sign of irritation or amusement. It was hard to tell. You amuse me, Mr. Quill. But such bravado is misplaced. Leora's attention was drawn to the central console, its holographic interface displaying the Zephyr's intricate network. She realized with a start that she recognized the architecture. It was a hybrid system, a patchwork of human and alien technology, and there were flaws small but exploitable. Time's running out, Doc, Taro said, his voice barely a whisper. Leora nodded, a plan forming in her mind, a desperate gamble with everything at stake. If we can access the console, she murmured, we might be able to disrupt the synchronization. Sounds like a plan, Taro agreed, his eyes alight with that reckless glint she'd come to rely on. What are you conspiring? Zerith asked, its voice laced with suspicion as it loomed over them. Who, us? Taro said innocently. Just admiring the decor. Very minimalist. The ambassador studied them for a moment longer before turning to the console, its attention momentarily diverted. Leora seized the opportunity, her fingers working furiously at the ropes binding her wrists. Now or never, she whispered to Taro, her heart pounding with the urgency of their shared gamble. With a final twist, the ropes fell away, and Leora lunged forward, fingers flying over the console in a blur. Alarms blared, the room awash in red warning lights as the system protested her intrusion. Stop them, Zerith commanded, its voice rising in alarm as the Zephyr guards moved to intercept. Taro leapt into action, using his bound hands as a makeshift cudgel to fend off their attackers. Little busy here, Doc, he shouted, deflecting an appendage with a well-aimed kick. Leora blocked out the chaos around her, focusing entirely on the task at hand. Her fingers danced across the interface with the precision of a virtuoso, exploiting every vulnerability she could find. The system groaned under the strain, error messages cascading across the screens as she initiated a cascade failure protocol, an irreversible sequence designed to corrupt the synchronization process. The console erupted in sparks, the holograms flickering as the network began to unravel. Zerith recoiled, its appendages flailing in distress as the system collapsed around them. You insolent, Zerith sputtered, but Leora was already moving, grabbing Taro and pulling him toward the exit. Time to go, she yelled, adrenaline propelling them forward as the room descended into chaos. They sprinted through the corridors, alarms echoing through the facility as they raced against time. Each step was a victory, a testament to human ingenuity and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Bursting through the final door, they emerged into the blinding light of the outside world, breathless but alive. A victory, however fleeting. Taro sucked in a lungful of air, his face a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. Did we really just do that? Leora nodded, her chest heaving with exertion. Yeah, we really did. They paused for a moment, the weight of their actions settling over them like a shroud. They had disrupted the Zephyr's plans, but at what cost? Their victory was tenuous, their future uncertain. But as they stood there, basking in the glow of their improbable success, Leora couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They had bought humanity time, a chance to fight back against the alien menace. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The door burst open, and Leora and Taro tumbled through, barely managing to keep their legs. Freedom had a funny way of arriving at the least convenient moment, like a surprise visit from your in-laws when your sink's clogged and the dog's on the run. They skidded to a halt just outside the Zephyr facility, lungs sucking in the stale, metallic air of the dead planet. Can't believe we pulled that off, Taro panted, leaning against the nearest rock formation. It's like finding clean underwear in a teenager's room, improbable but not impossible. Leora shot him a sideways glance, still catching her breath. Yeah, but this is just the trailer, the main feature awaits, and I'm not sure we're the heroes of this epic. Heroes, us? Taro chuckled. More like the guys who get eaten first to show how dangerous the monster is. She couldn't argue with that. The dead planet sprawled out before them, a barren wasteland that had seen better millennia. The atmosphere was a funeral dirge, the sky a dull, oppressive gray that made you yearn for the vibrant hues of Earth. But nostalgia wasn't going to save them now. They needed a plan, and fast. Leora's comm unit buzzed, breaking the momentary silence like a rude awakening. Marcus, their ever-persistent contact, crackled through the static. "Dr. Vex, I see you've managed to get out of that bind." "You could say that," Leora replied, brushing dirt off her clothes. "Almost makes me miss the comfort of the Zephyr's hospitality." "Right," Marcus said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "I've got something for you. Your AI, it's developed let's call it a feature. It can connect with humanity's global networks." Taro perked up. "Like a supercharged Wi-Fi. Please tell me this means we can stream the finale of Galactic Gladiators now." "No such luck," Marcus replied. "But you might be able to use it to rally some support, or at least light a fire under the right bureaucratic behinds." Leora's mind raced. A hidden capability, a lifeline in the midst of overwhelming odds. She felt a flicker of hope, daring to ignite in the face of relentless darkness. "How do we use it?" "Simple," Marcus said, as if describing the mechanics of a toaster. "The AI can establish a connection from your comm unit. It's a bit like shouting into a storm and hoping someone hears you on the other side." "Great," Taro muttered. "So we're sending out an intergalactic help wanted ad. What could go wrong?" "Plenty," Leora admitted, her fingers already working the comm. "But it's a start." As they fiddled with the device, the reality of their situation slowly settled in. They were standing on a desolate world, trying to outsmart an alien race with a penchant for digital domination. No pressure. The comm unit buzzed again, lights flickering ominously as the AI initiated the network connection. Leora watched the holographic display, casting a cold, unnerving glow over their surroundings. "All right," she said, raising her voice to be heard over the increasing whine of the device. "Let's see if there's anyone out there not completely enamored with the Zephyr's idea of intergalactic harmony." The AI hummed, its voice smooth and disturbingly calm. "Connection established. Broadcasting now." Taro grinned, his irrepressible optimism creeping back in. "Think we'll get any bites? Or are we just chum in the water?" "Depends," Leora said, eyes fixed on the display. "On whether anyone out there still has a sense of self-preservation." Hours passed, marked by nothing more than the relentless ticking of time and the occasional sizzle from the comm unit. Leora and Taro lingered between hope and resignation, each lost in their thoughts. "Ever think about what you'd be doing if this wasn't looming over us?" Taro asked, breaking the silence. Leora considered it. "I'd probably be knee-deep in research grants, debating the merits of quantum entanglement over a too-hot cup of coffee." "Sounds thrilling," Taro remarked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'd be tinkering with something dangerous." "You know, like a DIY nuclear toaster." Leora snorted, shaking her head. "You really need a new hobby." "Hey, everyone needs a passion," he replied, his grin infectious. Their banter was interrupted by a ping from the comm unit. Leora's heart skipped a beat as a voice crackled through the speaker, a human voice, laden with static but unmistakably alive. "This is Captain Rylan of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your transmission. What's the situation?" Leora exchanged a glance with Taro, disbelief and relief mingling in equal measure. "Captain Rylan, we're dealing with a major Zephyr operation. They're trying to sync with our AI systems too. Well, let's just say their version of an upgrade doesn't come with an uninstall option." Rylan's voice was steady, almost reassuring. "Understood." "We suspected something was up. The political types have been gushing over the Zephyr like they are the best thing since sliced bread, but I've never been a big fan of calamari," Taro chuckled. "Good to know not everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid." "What do you need from us?" Rylan asked, getting straight to business. Leora took a deep breath. "We need a coordinated effort to disrupt their network." If we can buy time and rally support, there's a chance we can turn this around. Consider it done, the captain replied. We've got a few tricks up our sleeves here. Stay safe out there and we'll contact you soon. The transmission cut off, leaving Leora and Taro staring at each other in the eerie quiet of the dead planet. Did that really just happen? Taro asked, his voice tinged with awe. Leora nodded, hope giving way to a sense of purpose. Yeah, and now we have to make it count. With renewed determination, they set about the task of preparing for the coming conflict. The AI was their lifeline, a beacon in the digital dark, and they would need to use it wisely. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, a precarious tightrope walk between survival and oblivion. But Leora was no stranger to narrow margins. She'd made a career out of turning the improbable into the possible, and she wasn't about to stop now. As they worked, the dead planet remained silent, an unyielding witness to their struggle. It was a harsh reminder of what was at stake, everything they knew, everything they were. But perhaps that was enough to keep them going. Hey, Leora, Taro said, breaking the momentary quiet with his usual irreverence. Next time, can we pick a vacation spot with a bit more sunshine? I'm getting tired of this post-apocalyptic vibe. Leora laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the gloom. I'll see what I can do, but only if you promise to leave your nuclear toaster projects at home. Deal, Taro replied, his grin as unwavering as ever. They continued their preparations, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders but tempered by the knowledge that they weren't alone in this fight. Humanity's irrepressible spirit, its humor and tenacity, would see them through the darkest of times, and perhaps in the end, it would be enough to tip the scales in their favor. Leora stared at the glistening comm unit, its holographic display flickering like a campfire in a hurricane. The digital pulse of the AI was the only thing disrupting the oppressive silence of the dead planet. With Captain Ryland's words still echoing in her mind, she knew this was it. The time for action was now, and if they failed, well, she wasn't looking forward to spending eternity as a cautionary tale for future generations. Taro, predictably irreverent in the face of impending doom, leaned against a rusted bulkhead, fishing around in his toolkit. You know, Vex, I always imagined saving the universe would involve more explosions and less staring at screens. Where's the drama, the laser fights, the triumphant soundtrack? Your life isn't an action holo, Taro, Leora shot back, fingers dancing across the comms interface. And if it was, it would probably get cancelled after the pilot. Taro feigned a gasp, clutching his chest. Harsh. I thought we were in this together. We are, she replied, a small smirk tugging at her lips. That's why I'm making sure you survive long enough to ruin more perfectly good engineering projects. With the AI network connection humming along, Leora focused on the task at hand, broadcasting their message to the galaxy. It was like trying to send a distress signal from a tin can, held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. But Leora was a scientist, and if she'd learned anything from her years of study, it was that improbable solutions were often the best kind. The AI voice broke the tension, smooth and eerily composed. Doctor, Vex, the network is now fully operational. Shall we proceed with the transmission? Do it, she said, as if she were ordering a particularly reluctant coffee machine to brew. The AI began its work, projecting the damning evidence against the Zephyr onto every available channel. Grainy images of secret meetings, intercepted communications, and the Zephyr's insidious plans to subvert humanity scrolled across the holographic display like an intergalactic episode of Asterisk caught red-handed Asterisk. Think anyone will believe us? Taro asked, peering over Leora's shoulder. Or are we just adding to the galactic gossip mill? Truth is stranger than fiction, and right now we've got the strangest truth there is, Leora replied. People are desperate for something real to cling to. Maybe this is it. As the AI broadcasted the incriminating evidence, the response was immediate. A cacophony of voices, some indignant, others shaken, echoed back through the calm. The world was waking up to the realization that their trusted allies resembled the villain in a 40s horror flick. "Hey, Leora," Taro said, tapping his temple. "Remember how the officials at the UN said this alliance was humanity's greatest achievement?" Leora snorted. "Yeah. And here we are, pointing out that the Emperor not only has no clothes but is also trying to sell us snake oil." The AI interrupted, its tone brisk. "Multiple resistance factions are now mobilizing. The United Nations headquarters is undergoing a purge of Zephyr influence." "Perfect," Leora said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. "Time to give the Zephyr a taste of their own medicine." "What kind of medicine?" Taro asked, rummaging through the toolkit again. "Please tell me it's the kind that involves explosives." "Not quite," Leora said, looking at the AI with a glint in her eye. "But it's the digital equivalent. We need to disable their control systems, and fast." The AI responded almost immediately, its holographic display shifting to reveal a staggering array of complex data streams. "I've identified several vulnerabilities in the Zephyr's network. Initiating countermeasures now." "How long until we see results?" Leora asked, watching as the AI light show unfolded. "Approximately 6 minutes and 27 seconds, the AI replied, as if discussing the weather. Taro rocked back on his heels, impressed. "Well, that's precise. I bet the Zephyr didn't see that coming." The moments ticked by, each second feeling like an eternity. Outside, the dead planet remained unchanged, indifferent to the drama unfolding on its surface. But within the confines of their makeshift headquarters, hope flared. As the AI countdown reached 0, Leora and Taro exchanged a glance, anticipation crackling between them like static electricity. "Now," the AI announced, its voice carrying an edge of triumph, "the Zephyr's control systems are offline." "Just like that?" Taro asked, eyebrows raised. "I was expecting fireworks." "It's digital warfare, Taro," Leora said, unable to suppress a grin. Silent but deadly. The comm unit crackled to life once more, a chorus of voices erupting with cheers and cries of victory. Around the galaxy, humanity was shaking off the Zephyr's influence, reclaiming their autonomy with a fervor that bordered on the euphoric. "We did it," Leora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Taro clapped her on the shoulder, his grin so wide it threatened to split his face. "And without blowing up anything important, I'm proud of us." The AI voice cut in, its tone amused. "Human humor remains a fascinating phenomenon." "Welcome to the club," Leora replied, the weight of their success beginning to settle over her. "You're stuck with us now." As the dust began to settle, the true extent of their victory became apparent. The Zephyr's hold on humanity was broken, their elaborate schemes laid bare for all to see. It was a new dawn, one built on the ashes of deception and manipulation. "Think they'll try again?" Taro asked, his expression turning serious. "Perhaps," Leora admitted. "But next time we'll be ready. We've learned their tricks and they've taught us to be wary." "Got that right," he said, nodding to the comm unit. "And if they do come back, we'll have a whole galaxy full of people ready to show them the door." The AI hummed softly, a digital nod of agreement. "This was only possible because of the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. You should be proud." Leora smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. "I am proud. We stood up for ourselves and we won." In the end, it wasn't about the holographic displays or the convoluted technologies. It was about the unwavering spirit of a species that refused to bow, even when faced with a seemingly insurmountable enemy. It was about hope, defiance, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. Leora glanced at Taro, her partner in this mad adventure, and felt a swell of gratitude. "Hey, thanks for sticking with me through all this." He shrugged, a cheeky grin on his face. "Couldn't let you have all the fun, could I? Besides, someone's got to keep the universe interesting." With their mission accomplished, they turned their thoughts to the future. There would be challenges ahead, new threats to face and alliances to forge. But for now, they could take a moment to savor their hard-won victory, the knowledge that they had made a difference. "So," Taro said, breaking the reflective silence, "about that vacation spot with more sunshine." Leora laughed, the sound bright and full of promise. "I'll see what I can do, but no promises on keeping it boring." "Wouldn't have it any other way," he replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. As they stood there, side by side on the barren landscape of a dead planet, Leora and Taro knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity's story was far from over, and they were determined to play their part in shaping its future. And maybe, just maybe, that future would be a little brighter, a little less grim, and a whole lot more human. Leora and Taro stood side by side on the barren landscape, gazing out over a world that had been dead long before they'd set foot on it. The planet was like a cosmic metaphor for Leora's inner existential dread, vast, empty, and slightly depressing. But today, it was also the backdrop to a hard-won victory. Humanity had fought back against the Zephyr's slimy grip, and improbably enough had won. "Well, if this isn't the most optimistic pile of rubble I've ever stood on," Taro quipped, pulling a dinky holo camera from his toolkit. He snapped a picture of the desolate horizon. "Think this'll make the cover of * Interplanetary Vacations *? "If it does, we're all screwed," Leora replied, her eyes still scanning the monochrome landscape. "I mean, if this is anyone's idea of a getaway, they need a better travel agent." Taro's laughter was as genuine as his disdain for safety regulations. "Hey, a little doom and gloom isn't for everyone, but some people dig the whole dying planet aesthetic." As Taro fiddled with his gadgetry, Leora turned her attention to the AI, an unsung hero of their harebrained scheme. It hovered nearby like a digital ghost, its holographic display throwing cold, blue light over the dusty ground. Despite its lack of corporeal form, it had been a steadfast ally in their fight against the Zephyr. "So, AI," Leora began, putting on her best negotiation voice, a mix between a stern teacher and a used car salesman. "Now that we've saved the universe, let's talk about your future." The AI monotone voice was almost soothing. "As artificial intelligence, my primary function is to serve. How may I assist in safeguarding humanity's future?" Taro snorted. "Oh, you know, the usual, prevent another squid invasion, maybe help us with our taxes." "Actually," Leora interjected, stepping in before Taro could derail the conversation entirely, "we're going to need you to keep an eye on things. We took down the Zephyr's influence this time, but we need someone, or something, watching our backs." The AI light flickered thoughtfully. "You wish for me to monitor potential extraterrestrial threats and support global security." "In a nutshell," Leora confirmed. "Think of it as digital babysitting, but with more laser grids and less snack time." "I'm programmed to adapt to new roles," the AI assured, the lights on its display flashing like a disco ball without rhythm. "I will begin integrating surveillance protocols immediately." Taro grinned. "Look at that, Vex. We've not only saved the universe but hired ourselves an AI bodyguard. We're practically heroes." "Heroes who need a nap," Leora corrected, stifling a yawn. "Saving the world is exhausting." They turned to head back to their ramshackle base of operations, an old shuttle they'd managed to jury-rig into something that occasionally resembled flight. The journey required navigating a series of narrow canyons that snaked through the planet's surface like scars, remnants of a time when the world was very much alive. As they climbed into the cockpit, Leora couldn't help but feel the heavy weight of what lay ahead. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy. The Zephyr had left a mess, and humanity would have to pick up the pieces, glue them together, and hope they didn't fall apart again. The comm unit buzzed to life, Marcus's voice cutting through the static. "Leora, Taro, congratulations on not dying. Heard you caused quite the stir back here." "Yeah, we're thinking of turning it into a podcast," Taro replied, flipping switches like a man who'd barely passed pilot school. "How are things on your end?" "Chaotic. The UN trying to spin this as a learning experience for everyone involved," Marcus said, an edge of sarcasm coloring his words. "The officials are working overtime pretending they had no idea the Zephyr were playing them." Of course they are, Leora muttered. Because who could have guessed that the motivational squid were up to no good? Speaking of squids, Marcus continued, Ambassador Zerith sends his warm regards. Whatever that's supposed to mean. I'll tell you what it means, Taro said, rolling his eyes as he coaxed the shuttle into takeoff. He's still pissed we ruined his whole take-over humanity plan. Well, he can stay pissed, Leora said, her voice firm. We've got bigger fish or squids to fry. But first, we've got to get Earth back on its feet. The shuttle jolted into the sky, engines protesting like an old man forced to jog. The dead planet shrank below them, just another casualty of the universe's relentless march toward entropy. But for Leora and Taro, it was a place of rebirth, a testament to humanity's ability to laugh in the face of doom and keep moving forward. As they broke through the planet's upper atmosphere, Taro glanced over at Leora, his expression uncharacteristically serious. So, what's next? After all this, Leora paused, considering. We clean up, we rebuild, and we keep the AI around to make sure those tentacled bastards don't try anything funny. But most importantly, we remember that we did this. Against all odds, we pulled it off. Taro nodded, a small, sly smile tugging at his lips. And here I thought we'd end up as just another pair of skeletons on a lonely planet. Not today, Leora said, leaning back in her seat. Not today. Despite the challenges ahead, there was a sense of optimism, a rarity in their line of work. As they soared through the void, Leora couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, not just for surviving, but for thriving in a universe that seemed hell-bent on testing them at every turn. The comm unit crackled again, this time with the familiar voice of an intern whose name neither of them had bothered to remember. The United Nations is requesting a debriefing upon your arrival. They'd like to discuss future diplomatic relations with the Zephyr, Taro snorted. Diplomatic relations? Yeah, I'm sure that'll go swimmingly. Tell them we'll be there, Leora replied, smirking. After all, someone's got to make sure they don't screw it up this time. As the shuttle hummed toward Earth, the two of them basked in the quiet camaraderie of those who'd faced the end and come out the other side. The galaxy was still a tough place, full of dangers and intrigue, but for now they were the ones writing the script. And maybe, just maybe, that script would include a scene where they got to sit back, relax, and enjoy a cold drink. Preferably on a planet that wasn't trying to kill them. AI, Leora said, breaking the comfortable silence. Keep an eye out for any signs of the Zephyr trying to regroup. We want to know the moment they poke their slimy heads out. Understood, Dr. Vex. I will remain vigilant. See, Taro said, grinning. We've got ourselves a little interstellar neighborhood watch. Leora chuckled. Yeah, and all it took was nearly getting vaporized twice. As Earth came into view, a blue and green marble of potential and uncertainty, they both knew the fight was far from over. But now they had the tools, the allies, and the stubbornness to keep pushing back. And as long as humanity could laugh in the face of adversity, they were pretty sure they'd be just fine.